Stargate Voyager.
Well, I am very excited to be joined by a fellow researcher, traveler, kind of friend now, Rhys Rogers. He's also a men's health expert in physiotherapy. He does healing martial arts and all kinds of crazy stuff. We did an episode together a couple months ago on some of his very interesting travels throughout Peru, and we followed each other on Instagram for a while, and so it's just been cool connecting with him. But Rhys, how you doing, man?
Hello, Derek. Yeah, great to be here. I'm really good. Really good. Awesome to be back on the show and talking to you and catching up.
Great to have you back. You're always traveling. You were just in Morocco, and I was admiring the painting behind you that you said your grandfather painted, like, did you say 40 years ago from Morocco?
This would be, yeah, in the mid-80s, so 40 years ago, a little bit more. He's a artist, Welsh artist. He was commissioned by the Welsh Arts Council to go out to Morocco and explore and paint the landscape, paint the culture and the people. So this is one of the pieces here. The man tilling soil with his horse in front of a Casbah in the desert. Morocco still very much looks like that in a lot of places. It's quite raw and feels unexplored. Yeah, I love the place.
So your grandfather and maybe even this painting, I'm assuming it kind of was part of your inspiration to explore and travel, and you've gone down the rabbit hole of ancient megaliths. So was that a little bit of your story there?
I would say definitely. My grandfather's house was always full of weird and wonderful things, trinkets and items that he brought back from travels. He used to have an old Zulu spear in the house, and he was also a scuba diver, and he had lots of like exoskeletons of lobsters and crabs in display cases, all different things that he collected from those travels. And he's actually been quite interested over the years about my megalithic journeys and adventures. So I often report back to him when I get back from my travels and get to chat about the things I've seen and show him some of the architecture that I've discovered and stumbled upon. So yeah, definitely the explorer's spirit is in the blood.
Very cool. Again, Rhys, thanks for joining me again. For everybody listening or watching, look back on the episode list and find the episode called Ancient Sites and Strange Lights. And that's the one Rhys and I did a couple months back, where I was really, he was sharing some just incredible, interesting stories of his time in the Sacred Valley of Peru. And he gets into some stargates, government demolition of inner Earth entrances, even strange lights in the sky. I mean, it was very captivating. So check that episode out and follow Rhys on Instagram. What's your handle?
Chi Physio, QI is in energy or life, breath, Chi Physio. I use physiotherapy and Eastern healing martial arts like Tai Chi and Qigong. So it's like a holistic healing approach to our modern ailments.
Very cool. So we're going to break down the grand finale of Ancient Apocalypse Season 2, which was Episode 6. So before we do, I just want to give you a chance. I know you've seen the whole Season 2 of Ancient Apocalypse. Rhys, what was your take on the overall show? What were your thoughts? What were your takeaways, highlights?
I mean, for me, the biggest highlight of both seasons has been the exposure of this sort of information. For some people that I'm close with, I guess I've been a bit of an anomaly. You may have had that experience as well amongst friends and family. Being interested in something that seems quite obscure and goes against the grain of a mainstream narrative. So, I mean, the biggest thing for me for both these seasons, season 2, is the exposure it's given this subject and how much credibility really the subject has now, and people are aware of the different topics that me and you are interested in, and now have standpoints to go and start researching themselves in different directions, because it's huge. The depth. I've been looking at this stuff for 12 years, and I forget how much I've consumed of information, both both from online research, from books, and from actually going out and visiting places. So for me, the greatest thing really that Hancock's done with the show, and it's really, I'm sure that's his real aim with it as well, is to gain exposure for this sort of information. And then for me, more personally, I read Fingerprints of the Gods, Magicians of the Gods, and America Before, all the books. And what I loved about this season is he really went into the juicy stuff of America Before with an extra overlay. There was extra information that wasn't in the books and new stuff. So he left some tidbits for even for the readers of his books to enjoy.
Well stated. I look at the series as like an on-ramp for the masses to get into what, like you said, what we've been studying for 10 plus years. Again, we've been doing this stuff for years. We've been going to these ancient sites and touching these megaliths for years. Most people have no clue, but they see this well-packaged, high production quality series on Netflix, and it's like a gentle on-ramp, where you start slow and you go faster and faster till you get on the freeway, and now you're going full speed at 60 miles per hour. He is appealing to the masses in kind of a gentle way, right? Visiting these sites that people have heard of, like Easter Island, Cusco, Palenque, and he meets with, the known experts in the academic field at these sites. But then he always ends with the questions and the breadcrumbs of this knowledge that goes back much further, right? So he just keeps hammering that home in each episode, right? Is this part of a lost legacy of knowledge from a lost civilization, right?
And I guess that's also what's really important, is continuing to ask the questions. A lot of the mainstream academic ideas seem to suggest that they already know the answers to a lot of these questions, and really, in my experience, a lot of the more mysterious and fantastical parts of this sort of research really are the big questions and the bits that make you go, wow, the bits that make you open your eyes and think that there's something a lot more here. You talked about like the core drills and the machining works at Giza and those sorts of things, elongated skulls. What he touched on with the Mayan calendar in this last episode that we're going to discuss now and unpack. When you look at these sorts of topics a little bit closer, you really do realize that there are many, many, many questions left that need to be asked and hopefully can be answered.
Well, before we jump into recapping episode 6, anything else you want to share, Rhys, about anything else you've been learning or visiting around the world, or do you want to just dive in and we'll just go from there?
Yeah, we can have a quick chat about Morocco. As we've mentioned, my grandfather's work and painting up there. Me and my wife have just been for a little 2-week holiday. We were torn between Turkey and Morocco, and Turkey would have been a megalith-laden adventure for sure. But my wife's 5 months pregnant now, and we decided we were going to take it easy for this holiday, not hike up too many hills and wander around too many big ancient sites in the sun. Morocco doesn't have many megaliths. There is a polygonal wall that I found online probably about a decade ago, and I've lost complete track of the location. I think it's at one of the old Roman sites, like Volubilis, in the north of Morocco. So we were kind of resigned to a mystery-free, megalith-free adventure this time, holiday. Turned out we had quite a mystery that just kind of appeared upon us. So we visited the Atlas Mountains, big ridge across North Africa. And if you know the legends about the Atlas Mountains, firstly, they're named after Atlas, the Titan, a giant, one of the ancient Greek Titans. Atlas held up the sky at the top of the Atlas Mountains, and he was involved in one of the trials of Hercules. They also say that potentially, Atlantis and the Atlantic Ocean is named after Atlas, the giant. Where the etymology of these words come from, I'm not 100% sure. Everyone's got a slightly different idea. But we went to the Atlas Mountains anyway. We visited a village that is near the base camp to Pakal, which is the highest mountain in North Africa, highest peak in North Africa. We went to hike it, pregnant wife, there was no chance of doing a 3-day hike up a mountain. But what we did find out was there's a shrine at the top of the mountain. So I started getting a bit excited. What's this shrine? Doing a bit of asking around in the village, a bit of reading about it. It's actually a mystical shrine. It's a shrine to the king of the Jinns, one of the 7 princes of the Jinn. So I did a fair bit of research, and he's said to have been a Jinn that converted to Islam during the time of Prophet Muhammad. The Jinn are like some kind of elemental. Sometimes they're demons. Sometimes they're more like elemental beings or giants of the earth. Through the reading, this prince of the Jinn converted to Islam and is said to have fought alongside the Prophet Muhammad in the Middle Ages. Was meant to be a giant in stature and made his final settlement at the top of this mountain, where there is now a giant rock. We'll call it a megalith because it is a mega stone, right? I didn't get a chance to climb up there to see if it was carved, but there's a giant stone that marks his site and a mosque built next to it. And it's almost like a sacrilegious pilgrimage site. So Muslims wouldn't be allowed to, or it would be haram for Muslims to take pilgrimage up to this mountain, but the previous sort of tribal cultures of the area would still do pilgrimages up the mountain to this site. So although there weren't meant to be giants and megaliths on holiday, Derek, we found some anyway, and there seems to be, these stories seem to be everywhere if you look hard enough, which that was really a bit of magic for me.
Fascinating. So Muslims today are not allowed to do this pilgrimage because why exactly?
Because the shrine is of a jinn, of a sort of interdimensional, non-human entity. So therefore it would be sacrilegious. The pilgrimage of Muslims would be to Mecca rather than to be worshipping at sites of the graves of other beings or other creatures.
Right. Yet it's been there supposedly since the Middle Ages. In what's now a Muslim country, and it means this thing is very important to the locals, correct?
Apparently, it can be a site that can be visited for healing. Yeah.
Wow. So you're just on holiday, having a good old time,
and the next thing we know, there's giants up on the top of the mountain. Yeah.
Next thing you're learning about legends of giants. But how far up did you get to where you saw the stone?
Oh, we didn't see the stone. No, it's a long way. It'd be a 2-day hike to get up to the stone. So I've seen the pictures and read about it. As I said, my wife's pregnant. We couldn't get up there. We were at 1,800 meters above sea level. You've got to get to about 2,000. No, it's about 4,300, I think, to Pakal. So you're going a long way up to see this. There's a tiny little village up there that's really isolated. Who obviously just man the mosque, the small mosque, which is like a shrine or a mausoleum for this sort of paranormal entity. If people want to look that up, the mountain is Pakal in the Atlas Mountains near the village of Imlil. A little bit of research on there, and you can find out about the shrine that's on Pakal and read a little bit more about this paranormal being that is said to be buried up there.
For regular listeners to this program, you guys know I love ancient legends and oral traditions, and we're going to get into some as we break down the final episode 6 of Ancient Apocalypse 2. Graham starts out at Palenque, this incredible site. It's known as the Temple of the Sun. And Graham starts out the episode by stating that the Mayan architecture is a repository of ancient knowledge linking sky and ground and heaven and earth. And he's at this huge complex that he points out seems to have been designed as an instrument to detect and manifest the wondrous harmony of the universe. Those are big words he's using. And so his big question at the beginning of the show is, how did the Mayans acquire this advanced astronomical know-how? And could we
Yeah.
be witnessing a legacy handed down by a far older civilization? Rhys, what was your take on what you saw in this episode of Graham at Palenque?
Lovely episode, fantastic. Palenque is one of the sites in Mexico I visited back in 2017. I spent a few days at Palenque. If anyone's not been, lovely place to go. It takes a bit of time to get there. It's well worth spending a couple of days and exploring the jungle around the site. I think he's so right. You know, these sorts of solar alignments and the way they built these temples. You know, that either takes time or pre-knowledge in some way, shape, or form. You've got to observe for a long period of time the stars, and they were talking specifically about Venus, weren't they? The Mayans were particularly interested in Venus. That takes a long passage of time to observe where planets and stars will rise at certain times of the year, and then to map that, and then to go beyond mapping it, but build huge pyramid structures that allow you to pinpoint those alignments. And even when he came down to these little like chambers built on top of the pyramids where the light would shine through at certain angles and illuminate certain doorways, certain rooms, certain crevices, depending on which equinox, which time of year, which angle of the sun, etc., etc. It's just, as you say, like how can that be achieved by very basic cultures without a lot of time, without a lot of preparation? Granted, I mean, they had time, right? There have been millennia. And he discussed in the episode that the civilization appeared to arise around 3000 BC, or that's when the Maya said that they first arose. So maybe there was time, but to create these massive structures along with that knowledge is a real feat.
Dominating the center of the site, Palenque, is what Graham called the most impressive edifice, known as the palace. And above it looms this, towering like structure. And in the structure is a room with these glyphs representing one of the most important planets to the Maya, which you mentioned, Venus. And Graham points out that scholars have confirmed through Mayan texts that the symbol does indeed represent the brightest planet, Venus, in the night sky. And so Graham asks, could it be that this tower was built specifically for use by astronomers? And that leads to the next question: why Venus? And Graham theorizes that it has something to do with one of the greatest Mayan mythological figures, Kukulkan, right?
Visiting these places in Mexico, particularly the Mexican sites, because they're these big pyramid compounds with multiple pyramids, right? They're often very open. You only have to climb one of the pyramids within each complex to start to understand that they are working on alignments. And they would make fantastic observatories. We also know that there's cultures worldwide, particularly within this field we're interested in, Derek, these megalithic structures. We're building structures that align with solstices, that align with equinoxes. These markers, these year in, year out markers, are really, really important to the ancients.
I've been to Chichen Itza, but I have not been to Palenque like you. So it's great that we got both perspectives. But at all these sites, like you mentioned, the Maya were dedicating these temples to observing the stars. Even at Chichen Itza, one of the most famous buildings is called the observatory. And I've talked to people who've actually been inside, and they say it's like you can see evidence where there was even mechanical components inside, just kind of empty now, but you can still see how this thing was far more advanced than we can imagine. And so, but a lot of all these sites, they're talking about Kukulkan, the feathered or plumed serpent. And so Graham kind of goes into his origin story real quick, and he shares how, according to the Mayans legends, Kukulkan again, was identified with the brightest planet in the heavens, and Venus. And the traditions say that Kukulkan Khan arrived after a great cataclysm, and then he arrived, and he was this wise teacher who gave instructions to the locals on the rule of law, how to organize a civilization, how to cultivate corn, how to build great monuments in stone. And then after his time was finished, it's like he kind of disappeared. Yet he continued to be worshipped and deified. And so, very interesting how we see Kukulkan Khan, the feathered serpent, symbolized everywhere. And then Graham took a minute in this episode to go to show what happens at Chichen Itza at the Kukulkan Khan pyramid. Do you want to explain that?
The way the pyramid is designed in its steps, with the serpent heads at the bottom of the steps.
Yeah.
At the spring equinox, am I right?
Yep.
At the spring equinox, the light shines across the pyramid, and due to the undulations of the pyramid, creates this undulation of the serpent, almost the point as the sun rises or as it sets, where the serpent actually appears to move, almost as if it's slithering down the pyramid, which, again, like I was saying, there's one thing is watching the stars and making markers. Another thing is to then incorporate it into architecture. You're really looking at quite advanced science there, observationally and then architecturally, to be able to marry the two. Which again, Graham's famous book, Fingerprints of the Gods. These are the fingerprints, and it is to do with the marrying of the sky and the earth, creating almost like star temples on earth that are mirroring the night sky. Effigies or monuments to the great cosmos above.
Yeah, I love how you stated that. So well said. It's one thing to learn about the stars. It's another thing to incorporate this into architecture. Graham points out it's literally, according to the Maya, this is a manifestation of Kukulkan Khan. He was also known as Quetzalcoatl, and the Inca called him
Viracocha.
Viracocha. There we go. So isn't that interesting that it's like the same deity appearance, but they're all calling them different things?
Completely, yeah. The other one he mentions in the episode is Awanis, who is the fish-bodied deity or sage who leaves the sea in the Middle East, comes out and teaches the same things: agriculture, science, astronomy, building to the people of Mesopotamia. Graham talks about it in depth in Magicians of the Gods, and these are what he calls the magicians, the seven sages. It tends to be the number seven of these sort of founding scientists, the people that came back, or the beings that came and taught sort of hunter-gatherer type people living basic lives, modern architecture, farming, agriculture, all this stuff. At a very similar period of time, it appears to be as well. This is the 3000 BC date that Graham talks about in the episode, and that the archaeologist who's talking with him at Palenque says the Mayans dated the beginning of their civilization from. So we've got a very similar character worldwide, or group of characters, as they often come in groups of seven, like you mentioned in earlier episodes about the similar character who came to Easter Island. Those similar characters worldwide at a similar time, about 3000 BC, doing the same sort of thing. Was it the same group? Was it the same group of people flying around the world or sailing around the world and offloading, unloading knowledge as they went? For coincidence sake, it sounds like it must be. But it could have been large groups of people or beings,
Yeah, and Graham mentions that it's almost like it was one traveler, Quetzalcoatl, who's going around to these different places, but using a name that the locals will understand. So to one, it's Quetzalcoatl; to the other, Calme Viracocha; to the Inca, Calme Viracocha; to the Maya, Kukulkan Khan. So very interesting to think about. And then, like you said, we see Osiris in Egypt, all emerging about 3000 BC. And so you got to ask yourself, is this total coincidence, or was there something globally that happened related to an ancient apocalypse, right?
Well, the 3000 BC date is quite a bit later than the Younger Dryas, um, but maybe that would give the amount of time required from a global cataclysmic event. I believe the Viracocha story. They say they lived in 1,000 years of darkness and chaos before Viracocha arrived. That would push a date back even further for a cataclysmic event. And if we're looking at the Younger Dryas, what it appears from the science we have of the meteorite impacts in North America and the melting of the ice sheets, these episodes seem to happen over. It wasn't like a singular episode that wiped everything out and everything could start again, but it seemed to be cyclical. It seemed to happen over the span of thousands of years. And maybe we're looking at, a lot of destruction for a long time. And it's only been the last 5,000-6,000 years that the Earth has been stable enough to sustain the establishment and growth of high-tech civilizations again.
Yeah, because then Graham was breaking down. He met with Dr. Edwin Barnhart, I believe is how you say it, to talk about the Mayan calendar system and the numbering system, which is just interesting. So Dr. Edwin Barnhart's been mapping out Palenque for 25 years, I guess, and he's one of the very few people on Earth who can read the ancient Maya script, which is pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's breaking down how the Maya had this super advanced numbering system that was superior even to the Greeks and Romans. This was the key to calculating and predicting the movements of the heavenly bodies like Venus. And then he gets into the Mayan calendar system and how impressive it is. And they use like 3 different calendars, right?
So there was like 2 cyclical calendars, but I guess they would kind of rotate around, months, years, agricultural cycles, and then like the larger solar cycles and planetary cycles. And then the third calendar, which was like the linear long form, which
right
was one of the dates, something like 3 million years or something,
yeah.
or 33,000 years ago.
Yeah, the long calendar, he said, measures the passage of time, not just for years, but decades and centuries, but even into millennia, reaching deep into both the past and the future. So again, that's insane to consider.
That brings back the question that we discussed at the beginning, how we like the fact that Graham is always asking these big questions at the end of the episodes, and harkens back to the question we were talking about, how did they come up with these ideas to build these structures. If you've got a calendar that's set out that's going back thousands of years and going forward thousands of years, that takes even longer observation than me and you were even alluding to, with just being able to pinpoint astronomical activity. It's huge to have a calendar that goes that far in both directions.
Yeah, and the ancient Maya believed the world went through these reoccurring cycles of like creation and destruction, and that they were living in the 4th cycle, which they dated like 3,114 BC.
That's the
August 13th of that year. That's crazy that it was that calculated.
To the day.
And this is considered the start of the age that we are now living in. And so again, Graham finds it very interesting that they chose that date of, 3100 BC basically, because like he points out, this is when like the dynastic Egyptians emerge in Egypt.
Did they have the knowledge, or was this suddenly imparted to them at a similar time that it was imparted everywhere else? The structures that we're talking about, particularly Giza Plateau, the Giza pyramids, are earthquake proof, are catastrophe proof. Basically, they may not remain in perfect operating form, but they've stood the test of time. They are the sort of structures that we can imagine surviving cataclysm and still being here 9,000 years later, 10,000 years later. Yeah. You've been. I've not, but I've seen walls in Italy, Turkey, Peru that are made in a similar fashion to these sites. I can understand how integral and strong these structures are.
Graham then asks Dr. Barnhart how far back does he think we can trace the origins of the Maya? Barnhart, I think he'd be considered, kind of more in the mainstream camp. Yet Graham still got him to kind of utter these dates that probably freaked out a lot of people in the mainstream camp, which when he asked him that question about how far back, Barnhart states there are dates on some of these Mayan glyphs. One goes back to 33,000 years, like you mentioned. And another specific date leads us to exactly 5 million years ago. So Barnhart didn't come out and say himself that I believe, the Maya are much older, but he basically alluded to, hey, it's right here in their own writings. They are using some ancient dates.
Even if that 5 million date, is fantasy, they were still conceptualizing 5 million years ago. Something that classical history in Europe wasn't doing. Plato was taking information from Solon about 9,000 years prior to the time of Solon. We're talking about the 12,000 years ago Atlantis. These Mayans are conceptualizing dates 5 million years ago. That's a real testament to the minds of these scientists and these astronomers, that they were even thinking that far back in time.
And Graham points out that he says they were literally obsessed with the cosmos and obsessed with time, that these two issues were fundamental to their culture, and that they had this deep understanding of planets from vast antiquity. So, yeah, I mean, it really gives you an appreciation for just, again, how the knowledge that these Mayans had, and it's just so great that we still have their structures that we can see today. To ask you, when you were there, again, I haven't been to Palenque yet, but I've talked with others who have. One researcher, Hugh Newman, was there a couple years ago. We did an interview, and he was pointing out at the site there appeared to be megalithic foundations of much larger stone than the rest of the temples are made of. I don't know if it was along the Temple of Inscriptions, but he even has a video where he's pointing it out, and you see massive multi-ton stones. Did you notice any of that when you were there?
There was definitely some evidence of that. There's evidence of that quite a lot of the Mexican pyramid sites, actually. Mitla is one, that really springs to mind. The other one is Tula in the center, that's got the giant Atlantis statues on top of the main pyramid. But I did see some evidence of that Palenque. What also comes to mind with sites like Palenque is it's in deep jungle. So if there are megalithic foundations, I mean, they're under thousands of years worth of leaf fall, which would create soil. So how deep do we have to dig to find these foundations? Sites like Mitla in Mexico, where it's quite obvious, are far more arid. It's not a jungle environment. There would be far less soil build-up over time from all the leaf fall from the jungle. But Palenque, if you explore outside the main site, so Palenque is a national park. There's a whole park there, and you can explore the jungle and you can explore the ruins. And the jungle around the ruins that you can walk on trails has other pyramids and structures within it that are almost completely submerged in jungle that you can explore and find and spend all day at. So with regards to what megalithic structures there may be under these sites, I would say, like the idea of Sacsayhuaman, we know that there's many feet more underneath the structure that we see of more walls. We may be looking at digging down another 20 feet at sites like Palenque and finding much bigger, larger stones at the bases of these sites. It's just how far should we be looking? Right. How deep should we go?
Mitla is a good example that you brought up. Also, on the backside of Teotihuacan are massive stones just scattered, and I believe you can see some of them in the foundation, but author Marco Vagato pointed those out in an interview we did. He shared some of his photographs, and on the back side of this massive pyramid, you've just got these out of place artifacts, these massive blocks So again, it's like they were found and just left. Palenque, I can't wait to get there someday. It's such an incredible sight. It's so picturesque too, right?
It's beautiful. It's beautiful. If you go there and visit, you've got to spend a night at least, and you stay in the jungle within the national park. You wake up to the sound of howler monkeys, and there's snakes, and all sorts going on in Palenque. Mushrooms growing off trees, and it really is quite magical. Yeah, it's really worth the visit if anyone wants to go and have a jungle experience and a megalith experience at the same time. Palenque is a great place for that. I think also touching on what you were saying about the stonework in the Mexican sites. Yes, they're much smaller, softer stones, but what we're finding with the Mayan civilization is that we're looking at entire complexes of cities that are spanning all the way down into Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua, that are completely covered in jungle. It was a really massive, highly connected civilization. And what we see at sites like Palenque, Chichen Itza, Tikal is just the tip of the iceberg of what is there under the jungles.
Graham theorizes that the Mayan calendar, he basically says, is an out-of-place artifact itself, in that it's like it was, again, a legacy of knowledge passed down that the Mayan might have actually received from a culture far older than themselves. Do you have any thoughts on King Pakal? That's one of my favorite parts when it comes to Palenque, and Graham didn't really get into King Pakal at all. When you were there, did you get to see the area where he was discovered and the pictures of his incredible tomb?
They've rebuilt the tomb in the Anthropology Museum in Mexico, which again is a fantastic place to visit. If anyone's in Mexico, it's a really cool museum. Quite astounding work they've done on these funeral masks. I mean, not dissimilar to what the Egyptians were doing. Things like Tutankhamun, building these big funerary masks that would cover the mummies and mummification. And again, massive megalithic slabs encasing what seemed to be his tomb. About his history and about him and about his son, I haven't learned very much about that topic, but they were definitely expert craftsmen as well. And as what Graham gets into at the end of the episode is about, as you said, the fascination with the cosmos and the fascination with the afterlife. And this was clearly very important for this Maya civilization, as it was for Incan civilizations, many civilizations along the coast of Peru as well, the Sipan and the Moche cultures that were building big adobe mud pyramids in the Peruvian desert, all really focused on the afterlife and preserving the body through embalming and mummification for that process. So they were definitely big thinkers. Life wasn't just chop wood, carry water. It was looking to the stars and thinking about what was going to happen after time on Earth.
I believe Lord Pakal, or King Pakal, ruled at Palenque starting in 615 AD to 683 AD. And he was basically, if my memory serves me right, he was discovered in the base of the main pyramid in the 1950s. And he was found, like you said, wearing this incredible jade mask. And if you're watching by video, I'm going to have some photos up for you to see. But his tomb was absolutely massive. And it looks, precision shaped, megalithic style. It looks very similar to boxes kind of in the Serapeum, the smaller ones you might see. But again, compared to the Mayan architecture that you see on the outside of the pyramids, his tomb looks far superior, or the sarcophagus he's buried in. And it was 12 feet long, and it weighed 5 tons. So I'm going somewhere with this. 12 feet long was his sarcophagus, weighing 5 tons, precision carved. To just say the word on the street from the original excavators at the site was that he measured at least 7 foot 3 inches and had an elongated skull. When you look at other depictions of Pakal's family, It seems they possess some anomalies as well. What do you call it? Polydactylism, when you've got an extra finger.
Right.
I've seen other reports that he actually measured up to 9 feet tall. But the weird part is this. This was one of the greatest discoveries of the modern era, finding Lord Pakal in the 1950s. Where's his skeleton now? It's certainly not on display. And when you look at photographs and diagrams of his skull, it's almost like a blackout. According to reports in the original photos that were taken, he had this huge elongated skull. But when you Google his skeleton now, at least when I have, you never the head's always blacked out. It's like he doesn't even have a head hardly in the tomb. And then when you look at the lid of his sarcophagus, there's the famous debate that is he on some kind of craft, some kind of machine-like flying craft, or is this just fancy Mayan iconography? Any thoughts on all that?
Yeah, I've been looking at some similar stuff recently, actually, about sort of Mayan kings and lining up some of the iconography from some of the carvings with the Paracas skulls, and they do appear to have that interesting brow ridge that the Paracas skulls have before the head disappears into a headdress. This happens everywhere with these sorts of skeletons, doesn't it, Derek? They seem to disappear. The information starts to slowly vanish over time. In the exhibit where the funerary mask is exhibited in the Archaeological Museum in Mexico City, there are elongated skulls within the exhibit. Not quite as grand as the Paracas skulls, but still very much elongated. And if you poke your head around the back of the cabinet, it does appear that there's no sagittal suture on these skulls. I am of the opinion, and I'm no expert, but I am of the opinion, that these elongated skull people were deeply connected to a lot of these ancient sites we're investigating, and that seems to be the case from the narrative worldwide, places like Malta, Egypt, Peru, Mexico, etc. That there seems to be, where you find megalithic sites or grand monuments such as pyramids, that in the early excavations there were elongated skulls found at these locations. So who were these people, and what was their involvement with these sites? And if we're putting together what you've just revealed and what Graham is asking at the end of these episodes, then maybe these are the people that are imparting this knowledge, the knowledge of the calendar, the knowledge of the stones of Sacsayhuaman. Maybe these elongated skull people had something to do with it. There seems to be a big mystery here.
When the original archaeologists were going literally into Pakal's tomb, before they could get in it, there was literally this triangle trapezoidal door. I mean, it's an incredible thing in itself. Just the door was this triangle trapezoid that they had to open and get through to get inside.
Because there are some incredible megaliths at that museum in Mexico. Massive. There's a giant Olmec head or two there. There's the sun disk. There's that skull disc that they found in the center of Mexico City at Tenochtitlan. There really are megalithic artifacts there. Why can we not see this sarcophagi? With regards to Palenque, I do seem to remember a lot of the chambers being completely sealed off from the public. There were one or two pyramids you could climb, and the rest of the time it was wandering around the Palenque Park. You could walk around structures, you could walk to the feet of pyramids, but actually going up and looking inside chambers was something that the public couldn't do. So maybe there is, or there are, anomalies to be found with the right access.
Something else to point out before we end here is that, according to Cliff Dunning, NASA was literally down at Chichen Itza years ago, I think around 2010, and they had special access to study the Kukulkan pyramid. And apparently they were studying it, for its energy properties. The point is, when NASA's down studying Mayan pyramids, there's probably something more going on. Isn't that crazy?
Completely. Yeah. I mean, where are the results of that study? You know, are we being told about what they found there, or were they just looking and found nothing? You know, as the case seems to be. I was looking at pictures of Teotihuacan the other day, and like you said, there's some massive megalithic remnants scattered out the back of that site, and on the back of the pyramid of the sun. The pyramid itself looks like it's all made of rubble on the surface. Maybe deeper inside these structures, like we find in some of the places in Egypt, maybe deeper inside are megalithic cores, more precision built structures, and these more primitive pyramids have been built on top of these original structures. I was thinking that to myself, looking at Teotihuacan the other day on some aerial shots of the site, that deeper within the mass of stones and rubble, there could be a lot more. There could be other structures like we see in some other places in Egypt.
I'd love to find out. I'd love to go down to the inner depths. Well, Graham ends the episode by saying, and really he ends the season, you know, one of his last big statements is, old ideas are being pushed aside, and it's very clear that stuff just keeps getting older. And that's kind of his famous line, right? Stuff just keeps getting older.
Mm-hmm.
It was a great season overall. I enjoyed every episode. And again, I would encourage everybody watching or listening to this to subscribe to Netflix. If you're not, even if it's just to watch these 2 seasons, and then you can cancel your subscription. But anytime that there's a show like this that's showing quality footage of these ancient sites and giving some kind of decent information, I'm addicted. Rhys, any closing words? Any thoughts?
Just based off what you said there, or what I'd also implore to people is, you know, beyond the Netflix subscription, you know, if you're able to take your next holiday somewhere where there is something interesting, go and check it out, because you know these sites are scattered everywhere, and it doesn't, like my example at the beginning of finding effectively the legend of a giant's tomb at the top of a mountain in Morocco that I knew nothing about. These sorts of sites are scattered everywhere, and once you see them with your eyes, you can see high quality HD footage on a Netflix show, or on one of yours, or Uncharted X show. He's great, Ben from Uncharted X. You can see this footage, but when you see it for yourself and you really understand the magnitude and the size of some of these structures, it really changes the perspective on things. And you know, there are structures everywhere and sites everywhere, you know, across Europe, across Africa, across Central Asia and East Asia and beyond. You know, maybe your next holiday might be somewhere where you can go and check out something that really shifts your perspective on the history of the world, and makes you realize that not everything is built with bricks this big. I love the series. I love what Graham does, and I love what he stands for. You know, across the whole spectrum of his work, including his fiction. So, like I said at the beginning, it's just great to have some exposure to a topic that I'm so passionate about. And what it has gifted me as well is the ability to have conversations that I could only have with friends like yourself, with people that aren't, say, as fanatical as you or I am about these sorts of topics, Derek. It opens up this topic of discussion with people that I wouldn't have been able to have these conversations with before. And I'm passionate about learning about this. There's a big mystery here, and it fascinates me. I may never learn much more than I already know, or have already perceived to know, but I'm really enjoying the journey along the way. And you know, the world is far more magical than we take it for at face value.
You mentioned people taking a holiday or their next vacation and making time to see some megaliths. So I wanted to give a shameless plug for my next Peru tour.
Mm-hmm.
And when I'm done, Rhys, I want to ask you one more question, so I'll let you think about it. That is, of all these sites that you've seen around the world, what would you say is your favorite site and why? So think about that, and I'll plug this tour. But if you guys are free this May, I want to invite you on our 2025 Peru and or Easter Island tours. It's going to be an incredible South American adventure. This tour is designed to where you can do the whole thing. You can do our pre-tour where we're going to go to the Nazca lines and see elongated skulls in Paracas, the main tour in Cusco and Machu Picchu, and then we're going to do a post-tour to Easter Island. So you can do the whole thing together, one enchilada, or you can just go to Easter Island with us, or you can just go to Peru with us. And right now you can get $500 off by using code Stargate. And I think this is one of the most affordable Peru or Easter Island trips you're going to find. And we've got the price under $3,000 right now with the $500 discount. So go to stargatevoyager.com/tours to get all the info, or just click the link in the show notes of this episode. Okay, so Rhys, we're going to end with you sharing, what is your most favorite ancient site that you visited and why?
Peru's fantastic, and probably like all the sites in Peru, really, I love. But one that's quite close to my heart, quite special, is Gunung Padang in Java, in Indonesia, and all of Java, really. I think Java has a lot to offer for megalithic explorers, and I think that in the future there will be a lot more sites found there. When you visit Gunung Padang, it's not easy to get to. You're out in the middle of nowhere in Java, which is, a massive island. People that don't speak very much English, very different culturally to the UK or to the US or any sort of European countries. And Gunung Padang is just in the middle of the jungle, and it's this great big pyramidal structure covered in these amazing basalt stones. And because it's like Palenque, consumed by the jungle, it's got a very grounded energy. It feels very, very special, but you can feel the ceremonial element of it. And what I really loved about Gunung Padang was looking out from the top, because you're on top of a pyramid over the jungle, looking out and going, well, there's a hilltop there, and there's a hilltop there, and there's a hilltop there. How many of these hilltops that are still covered in jungle have something profound on top of them? And the other thing about Java then is the Sunda Plate. The fact that whole area, Java, Malaysia, Sulawesi, Sumatra, Borneo, was all connected, and it was a much larger landmass. So what if the sites we're seeing in Java are just the tip of the iceberg for what could be there? And Gunung Padang's not the only pyramid in Java. There are other sites. So yeah, for me, I've got a Gunung Padang t-shirt as well, which I lost this year and have recently found. And maybe if we talk again next time, I'll wear it to rep. And it's super old and battered. I've had it like 10 years, and I've cut the sleeves off, but I love it. I just love repping the site. And like I said, just implore people to see on their next holiday if there's anything in the area that they can go and have a look at. Whether it be Mexico, Italy, Greece, Spain, Japan, and beyond. Many places have something, and just that something could blow your mind.
Well said. Well said. Yeah. Gunung
Padang, yeah.
Isn't that the site that Graham explored in the first episode of Ancient Apocalypse 1?
Exactly. Yeah. That site. It appears to be a 22,000-year-old pyramid in the Javanese jungle, and there is a megalithic site on top of this pyramid built out of hexagonal basalt blocks, which is far more crude. Still impressive, but could have been done by more primitive man. But the interesting thing about Gunung Padang, I should have mentioned this because you asked me the question, is that there are two chambers in there. They've done LiDAR on the pyramid, and there are two chambers that could well been unopened for thousands of years. We could be looking at another elongated skull king in a giant sarcophagi waiting to be discovered, Derek. Who knows? At the moment, excavations have been halted by the Javanese government, and nothing more is being done there since those LiDAR and core drills. They discovered the age of the base of the pyramid through core drills. So yeah, we're looking at 20,000 years of a man-made hill.
And since then, they've halted excavations. Isn't that interesting? Which sounds very similar to, the news Jimmy Corsetti's been breaking about Göbekli Tepe, that here we've got one of the greatest ancient sites that could reveal so many secrets of the earth, and they're basically going at a snail's pace on purpose, and they even don't hide the fact that they want future generations to excavate the site. And so that's just why.
Right? Yeah, it's to halt something. It's to halt discovery. It's to halt change and progress. It looks like Göbekli Tepe. They've built a little olive grove on part of it now as well. There's all sorts of strange things happening there. They've covered up to protect something that's 12,000 years old. They put a roof on it. Well, you wonder how it made it 12,000 years old. Without a roof in the first place. I know it was buried. Kahran Tepe, not far from Göbekli Tepe, excavations seem to be on the way there, and maybe we'll start to get some headway. I think the thing is, now that the interest is out and that this topic is gone globally through Netflix, there's going to be a lot more interest, and maybe these sorts of sites are going to be places that young budding archaeologists are going to want to be able to get funding to excavate or crowdfund themselves and go and do these things themselves. And maybe what we'll see, positive backlash from Graham's series is a new breed of young archaeologists who want to go out and excavate these sites. And if there's any out there who are looking for a pair of hands, I would love to come and contribute some time and be part of an excavation site somewhere for sure. Hit me up, say hello. I'm no archaeologist, but I can use a shovel for sure.
So if there's any archaeologists watching or listening, reach out to Rhys. He'll be your sidekick. And give us your Instagram handle again one more time, Rhys.
Yeah, it's Instagram. It's Chi Physio, QI Physio. That's my physiotherapy and healing martial arts page. Mostly at the moment, it's full of reels my wife's made of us in Morocco. I've taken a bit of a step back from making content. We're having a baby and we're prepping the house, so content is at the back of my mind. And I'm doing the healing people bit at the moment, just working as a physio and teaching what I teach, helping people move,
and heal themselves. You do online coaching and teaching, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So people can, if anybody sounds like you're into what Rhys offers, hit him up because he'll reach out to you. Do you want to plug your website too, or is the Instagram good enough?
Yeah, you can hit me on the website as well. My website probably needs some updating, but it's qiphysio.co.uk. So the same again, qiphysio.co.uk. And there's the Instagram. You can message me, have a chat. I work with breath work, traditional martial arts movements, and strength and conditioning training, a harmony of body and mind. We all have the capacity within ourselves through control of our breath and regular movement to heal many, many things. I think one of the biggest tragedies in modern society is that we don't move enough. And we are beings with joints and muscles, and we are designed to move, and many of us don't move further than the sofa or the seat of the vehicle that we commute to work in and the desk that we work at. And our bodies should move, and with adequate movement and regular movement and deep breathing, we can change a lot within ourselves. Yeah, we can heal ourselves.
Awesome. Well, Rhys, thank you so much for your time today. This was a pleasure talking with you about ancient history and ancient apocalypse. I hope you had as much fun as I did, and thanks to everybody that tuned into this. Hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next week for another episode. Thanks, Rhys.
Big respect, Derek. Thank you. Yeah, it was awesome as always. Nice one.